And then when I was about 10, your dad, your Uncle Albert was probably 9 or 8. Things went poorly for us, right? And I remember, your grandpa would say, tell us things like, hey, things are really tough, pray for us. I'd be like, God, I remember feeling this terrible sense of responsibility, like if I don't pray hard enough.
That's exactly what I
if I don't pray hard enough,
you're doing it wrong.
Yes. If I need to pray more, it's like I'm doing something wrong.
Seriously.
At what point is this when you first moved here, or just a little bit later?
This was just before we moved here. This was maybe a year before we moved here. Yeah, I think
really?
so.
Well, I can't remember any of that.
We were in Madrid. I remember
my first memory of that downfall was actually during a summer, where we were informed that we were not going back to our huge house in Madrid with 2-tier garden and things like that. That's my first memory of things going badly. In that summer, they said, we're not going back. We're going to Malaga. And I remember being heartbroken because we had our dogs in Madrid. I thought, what's going to happen with our dogs? And I forced my parents to go past our house in Madrid before moving down here, because I had to see our dogs before moving down. And that's my first recollection of things going bad. I didn't know that it'd been.
No, there was a period before then, and like if I put 2 and 2 together, well, other than Dad saying, "Hey, pray hard," because we're having real money problems.
So it started early.
I remember times when, I guess we weren't paying our phone bills, and they would cut the phone. I remember
But that was
Mom,
here. That was in Madrid.
Yes.
Really?
And I remember Mom, making excuses to friends. No, I think the dogs must have bitten into the wiring, and so we're having it repaired. But it was because we hadn't paid our bills, and so it started a little bit before then, right?
How do you feel about all that? Because I think that must have been the beginning of my resentment towards the Catholic vibe guiding our family, in the sense that they had that duality. You have to be meek, you have to pray, you have to take things as they come. At the same time, you have to lie to your neighbors to tell them that the dog ate the cable because you can't pay your phone bill.
But look, I mean,
and I always thought, so what are we doing here exactly? We're trying to keep up pretending that we're rich when we're not, and at the same time we're not allowed to lie. So what are we doing?
But the reality is that that's not unusual, and it has to do with where you are in the social strata, and at a certain level,
for sure,
it's as a family, it's very hard to give up, or even in certain circles, you don't want to be that family, or you don't want to be the ones that are going downhill, because nobody will touch you when you're used to.
And that's when I started seeing, because at that time we were, like you say, 8 or 9 years old. That's when I started realizing that I was different, because I couldn't see any of that. I mean, not in Madrid so much, because I can't remember. But once we were here and we met you guys at Sunnyview School, and we were like, hey, who are these guys? These little schmucks that you say. Once I got past that, once I got past that,
that's exactly who we were.
Yeah, I really couldn't see what the point was of keeping up with the Joneses and pretending to be something that we weren't. And I remember sitting there being really conflicted with our parents, where they were trying to do that, and they were trying to. I didn't see it in you guys, for instance. You were perfectly happy in the way we were. I used to sit down and really think about it and think, why are we lying to our cousins and our uncles, pretending that we're something that we're not? What is the point? I couldn't see the point when.
But I think at that point the cat was out of the bag. But you have to also consider that this isn't a family where Dad was a great plumber and he built a good plumbing business, and then we had a little bit of money.
He was pretty bad at everything. Yeah?
This is but what I'm saying is that as a family, who we were it goes back, right? It goes back several generations, and so when you've carved a certain place in society over many years, then it's hard to sort of give that up. Like where your grandma came from, right? Your grandma is not. They come from a family that has long-standing roots.
And that's our parents, and they can't help that, because that's the way they were brought up for generations. But you, as a child, what did you think? Because I'm saying what I thought. I was incredibly conflicted. I couldn't see any, especially once we got our roots down here, and we discovered our friendship with our friends, and everything else for me was absolutely 100% secondary. I didn't mind living in a tiny little dump or living in a palace with a huge, a huge red fireplace like we had, right? There was no need for that if what was around you was quality stuff. And I was always conflicted. So I was just wondering what your take on that was.